We need to do the roll call, so you want to go around the table. Todd Halligan.
Catherine Bissell.
Karen Pickard.
Lonnie Den.
Josie Billingham.
Craig Cooley.
Chris Uhas.
Dr. Wozniak is here. Dr. Peirce has a family issue to attend to, and Chris Biggs also sent me a note that he has a family issue that he's going to have to deal with the rest of the year and will have to withdraw from the committee, unfortunately. So I circulated the minutes previously. Did everybody have a chance to read them? Anybody have any additions or retractions? No? Have a motion for approval?
Motion.
Any against? Passes. So minutes are approved. So Lonnie, would you like to update us on the action registry, please? 10 minutes. Yeah.
So Lonnie Den, Senior Director, Mission Lifeline for the American Heart Association, and I'm just going to update on the Action Registry and Mission Lifeline. For those of you who aren't familiar, NCDR is, they house a lot of different data registries. Cardiac registries, including Action Registry, the guidelines. It's a joint American Heart Association, American College of Cardiology registry, the only national heart attack registry that we have. So the data that I'm talking about, for the most part, comes from the Action Registry. So what you're going to be looking at is for all of 2012, and then I also have some Texas-specific data for first quarter of this year. So this is a view of site distribution. So these are a number of hospitals per state that are submitting data to the registry. In Texas, we have it's actually I think 127 or 128. So of those, about 4 of them are hospitals that don't have cath labs, but the rest of them are hospitals that have cath labs. And we think this number changes every day, but we think we have about 134 statewide PCI capable hospitals.
Is that the largest number?
Texas?
Yep.
Of course. No, it is. We're I think we're the largest contributor at this point in terms of patient records nationwide. So we also have a lot of hospitals. And then this gives you an idea of the number of records submitted. Once the American Heart Association and the American College of Cardiology joined forces, we've seen a huge uptake in registry usage. Hospitals don't have to choose between the two anymore. It's all in one place. Oh, my Texas is so scrunched on my slides. I'm sorry about that. I don't know why it looks this way, but so we have had this past year this new option for regions and states to take all of the Action Registry Get with the Guidelines STEMI data and have it aggregated into one report and allow benchmarking of hospitals in that report, so blinded or unblinded. Nationwide, there are 40 places using the regional reports. In our affiliate, we have, aside from Texas, we have states that are using it as their statewide STEMI registry, so like Colorado and Oklahoma. are doing that, as well as many of the other states around the nation. And Texas, as many of you know, the RACs are sometimes the same size as states, sometimes larger than some of the states around the country. So we have 5 regional reports right now in the state of Texas. So we have 5 RACs that have decided to do this. Border RAC, which encompasses the El Paso CAT RAC, which is a capital area or Austin region, NIC-TRAC, so Dallas-Fort Worth area, CETRAC, the Houston region, and STRAC, the San Antonio region. And so back to kind of that larger pool of data, just wanted to give you a snapshot of just some things that we're seeing, some improvements we're seeing. This is a comparison between 2007 to 2012, door-to-balloon improvements. So if you look at the first 2 columns, we're looking at transfer in patients. So this is these are median times, and they are the first door, so the referring hospital door to device at the receiving hospital. So those times have dropped from about 169 to 110. Also keep in mind that typically hospitals that are contributing data to the registries are more the top performers in the country. So I would imagine if we had an accurate picture, so if all hospitals were contributing, it might look a little worse than this. Now 110 minutes. And then the non-transfer patients, so just door-to-balloon, what we refer to door-to-balloon, 79 minutes down to 60 minutes, which is incredible. We never thought that we would see it drop that low. And then this one is a 12-month time period during that same time, door-to-balloon and door-to-needle times. So this is a little bit different look at the data. That first column all the way to the left is door-to-balloon. What percentage of the time are we getting that patient from the door of the receiving hospitals to balloon within 90 minutes? We're doing that 95% of the time. And the second column is door-to-balloon in less than or equal to 90 minutes, and those are for the transfer-in patients. That's the first door to device within 90 minutes, 32% of the time, and then the door-to-needle 30-minute goal, we're only meeting that 46% of the time. STEMI primary PCI results, door-to-balloon benchmarks for transfer-in patients. Here again, I think this is where we have a lot of opportunity, nationwide, statewide. This breaks it out into what percentage of the time are we making it for those transfer patients in 90 minutes, and then what percentage of the time are we making it in 120 minutes, which is the green column. So we're still, even at 120 minutes, only at like 65, 66%. And that's over the last 4 quarters. So not much improvement there. This is another little different look, but it includes the symptom onset, critical access timeline bars. The blue section is symptom onset to first medical contact with EMS. The pink section is first medical contact with EMS to ECG and that's 7 minutes across the board, which is terrific. And then the green section, the 12-lead ECG to the emergency department. The lavender section is length of stay in the ED department, and we've seen a drop in that as people are doing more of the fast tracking to the cath lab. And the little blue section is that transfer time to the cath lab, and then cath lab entry time to device is the orange section. So a drop from 145 minutes to 127 in quarter 4 of 2012. And then this is just a highlight. This is something that we track in Mission Lifeline. This is one of the benchmarks that sort of a hallmark of our program, and that is first medical contact with EMS to device times. What percentage of the time are we making that within 90 minutes? In 2010, we were at 57%, and now we've brought that up to 68%. So some improvements. Some improvements there. And then I just wanted to give you an idea of, I wanted to give you a few stats from Texas specific, what you were just looking at as national data, but for the hospitals and the regions that are getting regional reports, they're also getting the Texas benchmark There are a whole different inclusion exclusion criteria for these patients, but on these demographic pages, this includes almost all of your STEMI population without many exclusions. So the only thing I think I wanted to point out to you on this slide,
Can anybody read this?
no.
Is it possible to focus on the projectors out a little bit? We have a AV focus person. Good.
Oh, here we go. How's that? Is that readable?
No. Can anybody read that? Yeah.
Okay.
So you're going to have to tell us, Lonnie.
Okay. So number of total STEMI patients, this is Q1 2013. So Q1 of this year, number of STEMI patients entered for our state into the registry, 3,658. Nationwide number of STEMI patient records, 40,000 records. Those are direct presentations. And then on the right-hand side, we have our transfer-in patients, 1,207. For the nation, 16,781. And I'll make these slides. I'll send these slides to anybody who's interested. If you want to, I know some of you like to kind of compare your region to the rest of the state and the rest of the nation, and you certainly can have a copy of these if you wish. If there's anything specific that you're working on in your region that this might help you with. One thing I wanted to point out here is in hospital mortality, we've got unadjusted and risk-adjusted death, and I wanted you to see that unadjusted observed mortality rate for the state, 7.3%, and for the nation, 6.5%, and then risk-adjusted death, 6.7%, so a little lower than the national number, 6.9%. And if you're interested, I could not explain the formula they use to come up with those numbers, but if you're interested, that's all written out in the interpretation manual and glossary. And here's what I want. So this is, I wanted you to see that for the state, which is on the left-hand side, there's some blank area because this is actually a system report. I took all the system data out of it. So I didn't want to actually use anyone's data without all of their permission. But the numbers on the left-hand side are for the state, and the numbers on the right-hand side are for the nation. So we're tracking, like if you look at that median time from first medical contact to device, we're at 22 minutes, which is the national median as well. I'm sorry, 84 minutes. It's when I PDF'd it. When I PDF'd it, it kind of moved things around a little bit. Sorry, 84 minutes compared to 82 minutes, so 2 minutes longer. And the median time from cath lab arrival to device, 22 minutes, which is the same as the national number. And you've got your numbers there for direct presentations, transfers in. I think the arrival at the first facility to device, 96 minutes here versus 106 for the rest of the nation. So, like I said, if you're working on anything specific, you're welcome to these. And then, let me zoom back out a little bit. Just something I thought this group would want to be aware of, and that's that there's a new EMS recognition program. So if you submit your data, this is. You can apply for it in January. The data submission period is January through February. It's free. Right now we're being told that there's going to be no cost at all for EMS agencies to participate in this. So I'm very excited that we're going to be able to do something to recognize the EMS agencies that are working hard at these measures. It's going to be an online application. So EMS agencies will go in and enter their data for 3 metrics: first medical contact to device at the hospitals, arrival to lytics if they're taking patients to a referring hospital, and then percent of non-traumatic patients who are getting a 12-lead ECG. Those 3 things. So think a pillar of this, and something that we've always been interested in with Mission Lifeline, is that this is system work, and so that STEMI data feedback from the hospitals back out to EMS, so that they have this information, so that they can enter it and benchmark how they're working with their hospitals and their system is essential. And we'll ask that they meet those measures at least 75% of the time in order for us to give them recognition. And then we have, I think this is my last slide, we have 2 really great STEMI education opportunities coming up in October. Terrific things. ZTRAC, Catherine, Darrell, and team, David, they just have been working on putting together a STEMI conference. It'll be held at Rice University in Houston, and they have a lot of workshops around it. Like they're going to have an action registry workshop for data abstractors, $60 for both the workshop and the conference. So they've made it so affordable for everyone to attend, and great topics, great speakers. And then the Texas Statewide Conference is moving to San Antonio this year. It's the 24th and the 25th, and I have both of the websites here if you want to go on and get more information and get registered for those. And the day before the San Antonio Conference, there's a 12-lead ECG training course, also $75. Bob Page is coming in to do that. That's all I have.
Yeah, you're only 13 minutes over. That's okay. Seriously,
we got started late.
Seriously. So the mortality from 107 to 112, what happened with that? You did the comparison and declines in door in to balloon time of 169 minutes to 110. What did the mortality do?
I don't think I have a slide for mortality. I'll look.
Well, nationally it doesn't change, and so with that 110 minutes plus another 60, then that's going to be about 180. So that's 3 hours, and the symptom onset to device time went from 145 to 127, and again that's 2 hours, right? So. That's pretty good actually, but the mortality is 7%. So, Karen, do you remember what you guys saw in Dallas, the Dallas area? It seems to me similar numbers. Is that right?
Yeah, they were similar. I don't remember.
Similar numbers. And Dr. McCarthy's here from Houston, and he has his figures on mortality from action for EMS patients. What is it, Jamie?
About 9%.
9%. So if you're brought in by EMS in the United States and you're in the action registry, then your mortality rate is 9% right now. So these are little bits to remember. Anybody have any questions for Lonnie? Robert, you look like you're ready to talk.
I think we'll, in the interest of time, we'll hold on.
We've got time. We'll make time.
Hey, Lonnie, did you find anything that was looking at your data that seemed like you were surprised to see something, or did you feel like, no, that's expected, or I know this is your first time really looking at this in this grand scale.
We have probably 2 main gaps, statewide and nationwide. The time that we're spending in the emergency department, what you're looking at are median times, but many of our hospitals are holding patients in the emergency departments 40 minutes, 50 minutes, 30 minutes, and those are patients brought in by EMS. If they're being notified ahead of EMS arrival, why are they spending so much time in the ED? So that's something that is a huge opportunity for us. The other thing is a long dwell time in our referring hospitals. So we see times like, if you look at the individual hospital data, 127 minutes before they're transferred, even though they were identified really early, 80 minutes, 60 minutes, and that goal time should be less than 45 minutes in and out. Actually, the goal is 30 minutes in and out, but we give them a little more wiggle room.
Off the top of your head, do you know what percentage of people have pre-hospital transmission to the PCI center?
I don't.
Is that captured in action?
Not transmission, no. If it has to be communicated, but it could be just called in or.
Lonnie,
Lonnie, the
Well,
reported
would you
number.
just would you come up to the microphone because this is being transmitted on the web?
The one other area, having looked at the data for improvement, or at least data collection improvement, is the rate of pre-hospital ECG, which in the slide you showed is only 66%. So
Yeah.
they're either not doing them, or they don't have the equipment, or we're just not recording the data correctly. But that's a huge gap that could improve. So brought by EMS, but no pre-hospital ECG, you're going to have a long time in the wait in the emergency department, no matter how good the game is.
Yeah, great point.
One of the other issues is still the ability to transmit the ECG from local EMS units. And I was on call a few weeks ago when there was a life flight responded to a scene, and they were in a rural location, and they had radio contact but no cell contact, and there was no way to transmit the ECG. So we had to make a decision about transport. Do we pre-treat or not, and so forth. And that's technology that needs to be further enhanced, developed. So, any other questions for Lonnie? Thank you very much. Robert?
So I did get the opportunity to spend a Saturday morning, along with Lonnie was there too, at the Texas Council of Cardiovascular Disease and Stroke. Their meeting was August 3rd. It was warmly received. It was a fairly quick meeting with succinct presentations, and I will now be on the agenda to give them sort of updates on some of the things that we talk about at their quarterly meetings. We did reach out to extend the invitation for them to attend our meeting in some capacity, but I think we'll just keep working on that, building that bridge and that relationship. We all agree that there's a lot of overlap between their goals and our goals, and I think that I'll just leave it at that.
And the chairman of that committee is?
Neil Rutledge.
Dr. Rutledge. And so Dr. Rutledge is also chair of the stroke committee. So there's, I guess, at least some synergy with that committee, right?
That's true.
That's true. Okay. And the next, do you have anything you're going to plan on reporting at the next meeting for their meeting? For their meeting,
some of the discussions here, I think I'll obviously absorb what I feel is important here. If you want to talk to me about emphasizing certain points, I'll be glad to do that, or anything that you want me to try to develop, I'll be glad to do that. But I'll try to summarize, because their meeting runs with a long agenda, so I'll try to be succinct, but we can maybe collaborate, or anybody can tell me what they think that should be discussed or emphasized.
Excellent. Well, that's great. So this is a big day, because this is the first time we've talked about it at 3 or 4 different committee meetings, but now it's becoming reality. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah. So the one other issue is not on the agenda. I forgot to. I didn't see that. Is that the survey? We forgot that survey. So the survey is completed. It's just the execution of getting it to the people that are going to fill out the survey. I will need assistance on. Todd is going to help me with knowing the ins and outs of the different racks. There's going to be three different surveys directed towards the pre-hospital phase, EMS, the PCI, and then the non-PCI. Questions range from 20 to 25, so it's not painstakingly long. And it's really with the goal of trying to update and likely complement some of the stuff you have from the Action Registry, Lonnie, and maybe some of it will be redundant as well. But we'll see. I think the hardest part of these surveys, as you all know, is getting the participation.
So the 3 modules you're looking at are what again?
Pre-hospital. So EMS.
Yeah.
Then STEMI receiving, and then STEMI referring hospitals. So the bulk of the survey is really the EMS and then the STEMI receiving. That's kind of where most of the action is. The website that the survey will be on, it will be the one that we used before. It's been up for a while. It's called Texas Data Matters, all one word, .com. TexasDataMatters.com.
That's your website, right?
Correct. So I expect you'll be getting emails and different ways to try to just tickle you to remember to just take the time to fill out the survey.
Todd, any comments?
No, other than that, I told Dr. Wozniak I thought the best route would be to go through the RAC executive directors. They know all the players in their region, and I'm sure most of them will help facilitate the taking of that survey so that we get as many responses as possible.
We have a representative.
Hi, Dr. Smalling. How are you?
Good, how are you?
I think the EEDs are the way to go. I'm not sure why I'm standing here. We do have a website presentation coming up that might give you some more information on how to contact the various RACs. But
So the executive directors and you guys have a list of the executive directors of the RACs?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
and we'll make it happen.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
I'm not going to sit in the front row any longer.
Yes, you are. Catherine, you want to give us an update on the website?
Yes, so for the GTAC Cardiac Care Committee, we wanted to be able to have a repository of different documents that we felt was relevant to STEMI and ACS. And I worked with DSHS to provide some space, that REC is providing some space, and this is generally what the format's going to look like. Some of the things that we asked is, one, can we have all of the RAC's websites on there? So we downloaded this interactive map where you can actually click on the area that you want and it will go to that actual RAC's website. So access to all of the RACs and their websites are on there.
Good job.
The other thing is we wanted to...
Pick another one, just
There
see
you
if it
go.
works.
Pick another one. You can't pick your own. Is that better? Everybody's on there. Everybody is linked up. And then back to this. This is the homepage. So you'll be in DSHS. You'll click on cardiac care. You'll be able to click on resource documents. It'll take you here. One of the I took a shot at some of the headings, STEMI protocols and guidelines. If you click on that, it will take you to some of the papers that have been submitted and have been reviewed by certain members of the committee. And so when you click on these links, it takes you to those papers as well. And there's several different like lytics around here, papers that are submitted and are reviewed by committee members. We'll put those on there so everybody would have access to them. Any questions on that so far?
So, did you put all the papers on or just some of the papers?
Just the ones that I got feedback from those members. So at the last meeting, there were 4 members that were chosen to review papers. Lonnie Den, Todd, myself, yes, Dr. Cooley. So set up a Wigio account. It's in a Dropbox. And so whenever I get a new paper, I send out information.
I see.
And I ask them to look at it. And when they give me information back and they say, yeah, that's good for review, then I'll put that in the appropriate folder. Right now, up at the top right-hand side, it says click here to submit documents for review. The only way I could do this now is it comes to me and Grace Follis, who also works at SETRAC. And what we'll do at that point is we'll drop it into Wigio, and at that, we'll put it out to those members that are going to review those documents.
So do you have a list of the papers that weren't chosen?
Yes, but
Could you let us share that?
I don't have it with me. Would you like me to send that out to the public here? I can do that.
Thank you.
Now, it doesn't mean that they weren't chosen. It just means I didn't get a response on them. So since I don't know that everybody feels that it's appropriate, I thought that that's what we said at the last meeting, is that we needed to have some input from our members. So if I get input, I'll put them on there.
Okay.
Anybody have questions on the website?
So to get to this, you've got to go to GTAC, is that right?
Correct.
So you go to GTAC, and then what do you do?
Cardiac Care Committee.
Cardiac Care
When
Committee.
you're on that page, it says resource documents. When you click on that, and this is what I understand from DSHS, when you click on that, it will take us to this website.
Okay. Can you do that now?
Actually, and where is? I don't know, this was giving us issues earlier. Let me see if I can do that.
You need startup?
Huh?
You need startup?
I don't know. Earlier it was giving us a hard time with some of it. Let me see
Yeah,
if I can
take
do
us
it.
to the original website and march us through, so.
And then they're going to have a link in here for resource documents. And when you click on that link, it'll take us to the website I just showed you. So what I need now is approval that this is the way that we'd like for that to look. I think it fits all
So
DSH's.
just
Go
so
ahead.
where do you click on that?
They're going to,
It's not on there yet?
no. They're going to have to put a link on here. Now
Okay.
that we know that it's okay.
So formulate your motion.
So, I move to approve the format of this website, and I would send it to DSHS to put a link on here.
So you move to add a link to the Cardiac Care Committee website to link to CETRAC so that people will be able to access information on STEMI systems.
I second that.
Is that right?
Yes, I do.
That's what I thought you said. So Jane's not here? Where'd Jane go? So Dudley, you know about protocol. Tomorrow I'm supposed to make the recommendation at the council meeting for approval. Okay, so we have a motion, second. Todd seconded it. All ayes? Everybody says aye, no? Okay, fine. So I'll take your motion, which you'll write down for me, and propose it tomorrow morning. Excellent, excellent.
Thank you for all your hard work.
Outstanding. This is another big achievement. Gosh, that's 2 achievements today. Wow. All right. So, well, speaking of achievements, our next agenda item is the STEMI legislative process. And, you know, rather than me waxing eloquent, we can sort of hedge into public comment. And is Joel here? Joel?
Sure.
So while Joel's coming up, Joel Romley is the HA lobbyist, and he was really the prime mover behind the bill for a STEMI Center establishment of STEMI Center certification. So Joel, can you visit with us about that process?
Sure. I'll start, since there's timelines are very critical, I'll start backwards. Beginning November 2014, the first Monday after the elections is when bills can start being filed at the Texas legislature. And you have 60 days from that time to file bills. I think that's right. I think it's usually March, spring break is about when you can, the last day to file a bill. So the American Heart Association will be working on a draft again of the STEMI designation legislation. We will be working with stakeholders over this interim between now and next fall to identify concerns, what concerns they might have with a particular angle of the bill that was drafted. There will probably be some other proposals out there that we'd like to try to get everybody on one piece of legislation if possible. There's usually the lawmakers prefer that you come to the legislature with all your differences ironed out ahead of time and no surprises. That's the last thing they like to have is a surprise at a committee hearing and the whole thing fall apart. So there is an effort that we'll be coordinating with the help of GTAC suggestions or the Texas Council on Cardiovascular Disease, the Partnership for Health, the Partnership on Cardiovascular Disease and Stroke as well, to identify those stakeholders, whether it be the Hospital Association, the RACs, EMS, rural hospitals, different nurses, doctors, etc., to get their input now. Of course, the other thing to consider in this timeline is working backwards. It would be nice to walk in there with the different organizations signing off of lending their support and being able to drop their name of support on a card or actually making it part of their legislative agenda. And most of those associations or organizations start adopting their legislative priorities. I'd say they probably start putting things out next summer or fall. They'll start putting out their legislative agenda and items they'll support or oppose. So, a lot of the work needs to be done begin now through the summer of 2014 on what the proposal will look like, what stakeholders are going to be there, and of course identifying legislative champions. The bill does have to be drafted through Leg Council, which takes a little bit of time. The sooner you file your bill, the better, the quicker you'll get a committee hearing. There is a committee hearing deadline. And of course, what I can do is send, I don't know if the deadlines are out for the 2015 session, but their deadlines are pretty firm in terms of when bills have to be out of committee from one chamber to the other and vice versa. And then there's also the issue of cost. If there's a bill that has any particular cost to it, it's best to walk in there with a way of how we're going to pay for it. Lawmakers don't like to try to have to find the money and look under seat cushions, et cetera, and try to find those dollars. So if you can go in there with a bill that has no cost to it, makes things a little bit smoother. With that being said, we will be working with our colleagues. We'll be at this Texas STEMI conference this fall to take input and meet different stakeholders that we might need to be engaged with as well. Any questions?
I have a couple of questions, Joel. Can
Yes,
you hear
ma'am.
me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I read through all of the resources and all of the documents, and I also looked up to find where legislation was actually enacted in North Dakota, Nevada, and in Colorado. I couldn't find the Wyoming and Ohio stuff this afternoon. I really tried, but it's not published where I can get to it yet. So I don't know if I just don't have the correct way to get to it. But what I noticed a common theme in that was enacted in other states is the wording of the way the legislation is worded. So I also pulled up the stroke legislation that came up, and the one that was most common and most similarly structured was the Colorado legislation that actually went through. It has been enacted and it's still in the process. I think it's not completed until 2014, if I'm not mistaken, on that. But the process is getting started. And I noticed one other difference, just to kind of talk about it in the committee. The other legislation, let me get if I can talk. The other legislation that's out there that actually got enacted used much more generic wording. They didn't use American Heart and Mission Lifeline in their legislation. They used national governing bodies or national guidelines or more generic terms. So that, and the very last thing I want to kind of pick your brain on is, I read the letters from the American College of Cardiology, and they seem to, one, have an issue with a single system, which maybe that's because we're calling it American Heart, we're not saying a national body. And two, they really want a task force, so they want to be part of this. So maybe you can give us some ideas, and how do we pull in the ACC to be part of this? This is going to be a short timeline here. And maybe get our legislation so it's more generically worded, like some of the other legislation that has passed. What are your ideas?
I know the Texas proposal did reference the 3 recognition programs and did reference or other nationally recognized standards. It did mention that. And that's kind of been the model legislation that's been enacted in Wyoming, New Mexico, Colorado, I believe. And there's a few other states out towards the East Coast that have also adopted that model legislation. And primarily, these recommendations in the model legislation has been vetted through the national levels of the American Heart Association with input from different stakeholders across the country. There's a lot of science behind this recommended language on those states. But some of the others, it's not been efforts that have, like North Dakota, I don't think was an AHA initiative. But the reason we feel that the recognition has to have that national standards of recognition is because of the science it brings and the quality of care for the patient that we'd like to make sure those hospitals are giving.
So we realize that, we respect that, we really appreciate all that you do. I can tell you that Joel was a machine during those months that led up to this, and Being dragged into it myself was eye-opening, and Robert also testified before, was it the Senate committee, Robert?
Yes.
Would you want to relate that experience? I mean, you were well received, I heard, but why don't you talk about that a little bit?
There's not much to tell. I mean, we just pretty much, we represented the logic behind it, and then there were a lot of questions that I fielded regarding trying to fend off some of the concerns they had about some of the disharmony from the different organizations, particularly the American College of Cardiology. So, and just making them understand what the goal was, to try to make them, educate them on, this is not too much of a leap forward, but it is a step forward that's a necessary step to try to get on the map. I think you talked to use the term about a placeholder, effect, getting this established and then move forward from this established recognition. So.
Okay, so for the record, Dr. Wozniak and I were individual citizens addressing the various stakeholders and legislators during this period of time, and we didn't really reference GTAC at all, although that became an issue in terms of where some of the designation should reside. So, Joel, can you briefly go over this process for the stroke legislation that was passed?
Sure. I mean, that was before my time. I came on board in the fall of '05. The legislation had passed that spring. It did, if I remember correctly, and there's probably others in the room that could correct me, that the initial bill was a little bit broader piece of legislation that required data collection, funding, the transport protocols, the recognitions, and what came out was a scaled back version. And Texas was one of the few states that did implement such a program early in its around the country, which just did the recognition and the transport protocols. And the rules were written with the guidance to the GTAC Stroke Committee. And the bill did pass in 2005, and I don't think the rules were agreed to and commented on by stakeholders and finally implemented until 2008, maybe 2009.
2009. So so for the purposes of our education, can you talk about bills versus rules?
Sure.
And where they reside?
Whenever a piece of legislation is passed, it has to be implemented. So the STEMI designation legislation that we are proposing would have been implemented by the Department of State Health Services. There would have been some rules to write that would have basically kind of mirrored what the legislation, the intent of the legislation was just to recognize those hospitals that were STEMI centers, similar to stroke, where the districts would send them a letter or certificate that would recognize them. They would just demonstrate their national recognition from one of those three entities, and then they would just get the certificate, and that was it. And I think dishes would be able to develop a fee for that certificate. I know with stroke, I think it's $100, I believe. And I think it's, and Jane could probably correct me, it's maybe every 2 or 3 years they have to re-up for that recognition. And then at that time, it's just on the website. It doesn't, these are the stroke recognized primary stroke centers, so that's what would have occurred with the STEMI centers. They would have been recognized on the website once they sent in their paperwork, got the recognition, and paid their $100 or $125. The rule process is once the bill passes, it goes into effect. Usually, the legislature adjourns in May. The bill goes into effect in September. The process of rulemaking can take anywhere, as I shared with you, anywhere from a year to 3 years, or less, depending on if the bill is pretty simple to implement. And the process is public comment. Folks like myself and other stakeholders from the medical community coming and testifying before one of the divisions of the Department of State Health Services, comment being announced that there's a public comment period, rules being posted online and emailed to stakeholders. These are the rules to be considered. If you'd like to change them or make recommendations, come comment or share your thoughts, send in something in writing. And it's a very open process. It does take a little bit of time. And had that STEMI legislation passed, I would have foreseen it being implemented within a year or year and a half. and that's with any piece of legislation. Moving forward, to answer quickly to answer your question about the American College of Cardiology, we would like them to be more engaged.
Let's
Sure.
hold that discussion.
Okay.
So, stakeholders, Todd, as an EMS representative, does STEMI designation help you determine where to drop people off with heart attacks?
Well, I think it possibly could. I think, with, for example, all of the receiving hospitals in El Paso, since that's where I reside, I'll speak to that, have gone through the Society for Chest Pain Centers accreditation, survey, whatever you want to call it. And so everybody in town has that. So transport decision plans through our RAC was pretty simple. Since everybody there's no bypassing. The fact that if there was a secondary STEMI designation, I'm not sure how that would affect, since it's just another designation. If an area had nothing in place, I could see how it would affect EMS and their view of where they're taking their patients, especially with some of the times that we saw in Lonnie's slides and so on. I guess in reading the same letters that Christine was referring to, I understand her comment. I kind of feel the same way. I think if we could make a more generic statement instead of, I appreciate that Joel represents American Heart Association, but if we're talking about legislature, the more generic we make it, the easier it's going to be to abide by it when we start looking at the rules from a DSHA standpoint.
Just you're nodding. You want to say
I'm agreeing with everything you just said.
anything to add? So you're from a more rural location.
Yes, we're from a rural area.
How does it work where you are?
Ours is kind of a unique situation. We're an hour away from a level 3 trauma center, which is our cardiac, where we take our cardiac STEMIs. And we're an hour and a half from Lubbock, where we take our major traumas. And our STEMIs, we have a problem with a bypassing diversion with some of our physicians. We know in the field that we need to take that patient to the most appropriate facility, yet our physicians are wanting us to stop. They need to get lab work, they need to get chest x-rays, they need to do this, they need to do that. Wasting that time that we have instead of us taking directly to a PCI facility. Right now, we are trying to work with our physicians and our administrator and our nurses and EMS together to try to figure out the best solution. We know what the best solution is, which is straight to a facility that can take care of that patient, because we have no PCI facility, we have no surgery, we have nothing. We're just basically, like a lot of people say, a Band-Aid station, which we stabilize a lot of our patients with. That's the issue that we're seeing, is that we're having to ask Mother May I to take a patient that we know needs to go to a facility and being denied.
Okay, so do you have 12 lead capability on your
We have
rigs?
12 leads on our.
And you can transmit them?
We cannot transmit those yet, no.
And what would it take to transmit them? I mean, if there was a law that says you had to have transmission capability, could you do it?
If there's a law that, I think our issue is the money. I think it's with a lot of facilities.
Do you interpret them, and can you call the result in to the hospital ahead of time? Are you able to communicate the results and interpret from the field?
Yes, we can. And this is on the web.
I'm just going to tell you that's not going to work, Lonnie. That's not going to work.
No.
Because to mobilize a STEMI team takes a lot of effort and a lot of money. Now, Craig, raise your hand. Do you disagree with that?
Well, no, I think I mirror the general comments of looking through the way what was sent out for the bill that I guess didn't get through. I think it could benefit from being a little more generic. And I think we also can't forget the fact that there are scenarios and timeframes when going to a much closer facility that clearly would not be able to be a PCI center, but can give thrombolytics with some sort of teleguidance or protocolization of that can be just as beneficial, and potentially not more beneficial for the patient than trying to bypass in a very extreme rural area like that part of the state.
Good point.
So this needs to, I mean, I think having a state-driven process and trying to, we want, you know, every citizen in the state to hopefully have the best shot at healthcare overall. But the idea that everything has to be one size fits all in a disease process that we know has variability on its treatment based on timeline, I think we can get careful. We have to be careful how we pigeonhole ourselves in this.
Okay, so as part of this exercise, I put together a few talking points. And so you go to DISH's website and you can see that diseases of the heart killed 38,000 people in 2009 in Texas, and accidents killed 9. And so we have, you know, for 4 times the number of deaths, we have no support, basically. And that's an issue, I think. This doesn't scroll very well. And it talks about the trauma system and how there's certification processes, and we obviously probably needed to work on that for this particular problem. The mortality rate is 7.2% in patients brought in by EMS. In the U.S., that's 35,000 deaths per year, and I think we can cut it by 50%. I'll show you a little bit of data on that. So here is a little data that was published a little earlier this year by Dr. Anderson primarily, and it looked at our experience in Houston of giving pre-hospital fibrinolytics followed by immediate PCI compared to patients who were just brought in utilizing pre-hospital notification. So basically the same STEMI delivery system, STEMI treatment system, but we just had to pull out the fibrinolytics for a variety of reasons. And the mortality fell from 2.8% in hospital, went up from 2.8% to 10% when we stopped giving pre-hospital lytics, and the stroke rate was actually less in primary PCI. The bleeding rate was very similar, and the reinfarction rate was half what it was with primary PCI. And graphically, here's what it looked like. So this isn't randomized data, but it is the same physician, same hospital, same EMS system, and it is telling, and this goes along with everything that we've seen before. I think your comment about fibrinolytics pre-transfer may play a big role, particularly in Texas, but these are things that will have to be proven, and I think we can help do that with a STEMI system Texas-wide. So then after going through all of this and suffering the teleconferences with ACC Intelligentsia and talking to the Texas Hospital Association and talking to the Texas Medical Association, became clear that we really have to do a much better job of doing our homework, bringing in stakeholders, getting consensus before the bill's submitted. I think that was overwhelmingly clear. And even though we had the senators' support and at least several representatives' support, there was such an active lobby against this for what seemed to me silly reasons, but nonetheless very effective lobbying against it. It didn't pass. So I think we have to give some thought collectively about what do we want a bill to look like? What should it include? And these are just straw person things. So do we need to certify STEMI referral centers? So Todd, this gets into you. If we adopt Craig's tenet that we ought to give fibrinolytics to these people before we drip and before we ship them, that may be important. Do we empower EMS units to carry drugs, including fibrinolytics, on them? Is that a problem?
We don't have the structure in place to put fibrinolytics into the ambulances right now.
But,
Sure we do.
They're already
We can
there.
do it today.
Yeah,
They do it
can.
today, right now.
So-
If my medical director says put fiber analytics on my ambulance, I'm putting fiber analytics on my ambulance today.
Can we do it in all of Texas?
go ahead, Dudley. Go, Dudley, go, buddy, go.
So, I was looking at this, and I'm glad to hear Joel's up here talking today about what's going on, because last legislative session, our RAC wasn't even approached, and we have a STEMI system set up in our RAC, and we weren't approached until February during the legislative session. That's too late. So you need to expand that list of stakeholders, because I don't see RACs on there at all. You need PCI receiving centers, you need all that. This is going to be a tough fight, and it's going to be a tough fight, tougher than trauma in my opinion, because there's money involved. And everybody has their own little niche, and everybody has their own little corner that they want to protect in this. And so it's going to be a tough fight because money's on the table. But I've heard some things that scare me greatly. I've heard we should maybe just go for a much thinner shell of a bill and try to come back and fill it in like we did with stroke. Remember, we didn't put any money in stroke, and it's been 8-9 years now, and there's still no money in stroke to help the stroke systems develop. You can't continue to go back to that well and use trauma dollars to build these other systems, because that's what's going on today. So we need to find a way to fund it. We can't be afraid to walk in there with a bill that's going to cost money. Everybody is, because that's a death nail of a bill in our legislature. But if you're going to fund it, you need to find a way to fund it. And maybe that's the PCI centers pony up X amount of dollars, thousands of dollars, to fund the STEMI system in Texas. If it matters, which I truly believe it does, I know all of you think it does, and most of the people in this room believe it does, then we got to convince people we got to pay for it. And we need to build it in the same system, in the same place where our other acute care healthcare systems are being built. And that's at GTAC, and that's at the RAC level, and we need to fund the RACs appropriately to do the things we need to do this right. Let's not make the stroke mistake. And for those stroke people, I'm sorry, it was a mistake. And we still struggle in stroke, and it took that long because we didn't put any funding in there, and people can't go in there and help that. So a lot of this stuff is really cool, but I would hesitate to go any further than that Word document until we expand that list of stakeholders and we get us in a room for 2 or 3 times. And let us just duke it out. Lock the doors, we're in here until we duke it out and figure out how we're going to do this. And people can get mad and they can scream and holler and do all that stuff. But if we really want this system, we have to go into it realizing we've got to do it in the same way we've done it before, because it's successful and it's where all our players are. We've got to find money to fund it, and that may be because STEMIs have money associated with them. That may be those people funding it instead of going in trying to get the legislature to develop a dedicated fund that they're never going to pay us the money out of and suck it off to do something else with other than its intended purpose. And then we need to walk out of there arm in arm singing Kumbaya and walk down the halls of that legislature and pass this thing. But we can't go in there with 1 or 2 or 3 groups' ideas. We've got to have a cattle call, we've got to bring everybody in, and we've got to say what is it we want and knock that out, and then how are we going to pay for it. Then we go in and write the language to make that happen.
Dr. McCarthy, you've been working at SETRAC on parallel issues. So,
I mean, I would agree just sort of with everything that was just said, and I think the group that needs the designation more than anybody else are the rural areas that need to have some guidance so there's not local politics driving EMS agencies into hospitals they don't belong in. Now, some of them are going to be well-equipped, high-functioning, can deliver lytics and transfer quickly, but we also know there are those that are not, but are screaming and yelling at local political authorities about the EMS medical director who's driving their patients somewhere else, and they're then out of a job on the next election cycle. So I think those are critical issues that have to come through. The EMS agencies have a strong ability to drive this, but they also need data back from the hospitals they're dumping patients off, and that is a black hole in many areas. There are some areas that provide good feedback, but many that don't. And I'd agree, the list of stakeholders goes on, multiple groups that need to be heavily more invested. Emergency medicine needs to have a stronger place in this. They're key players in this game. But I'd agree with everything that you just said.
Craig? you're a new member of the committee, you haven't participated in this, you want to wade in at this point?
Not particularly, no. No, I think I agree. I mean, I agree with everything we've just said. I mean, I came from a state more recently where I did some EMS work where there was a cardiac system and there was a stroke system, and it sounds like it's kind of often considered on the other end of the political spectrum, but apparently they made the same mistakes because they passed things without funding and tried to run things through, and it was a very fragmented thing. It took the local versions of their RACs to accomplish the goal. So I think that from my limited time back in the state at this level, I know there's a lot going on at the regional levels and the local levels. They just need the connections, but I agree, there's a lot of other people that need to be in this list. And emergency medicine is a key part, not only in the urban receiving centers, but the rural centers, and as well as a lot of the other stakeholders that were already mentioned.
So there is a Texas chapter of the American College of Cardiology. Is there a Texas chapter of the EMS Society or something like that? Is there somebody else other than GTAC?
Yes, there is
involved?
There is the Texas College of Emergency Physicians. There is obviously the TTAP.
Texas Ambulance Association, Texas Fire Chiefs has an EMS board, the volunteer firefighters have an EMS board.
There's lots of
We'll be glad to help with that.
Stakeholders.
So could you all send me an email with your suggestions about this?
Absolutely.
I do want to applaud.
I'm sorry, John. I just want to say one other thing is I would just be a little careful. So after sitting down and listening and thinking about what I said, the only thing I didn't say is just be a little careful about getting in the weeds. We still need to be at the 50, 60,000 foot level on this for a long time before we get down into the weeds of some of these other more issues. And that's really what our system development should get us. The system development, once it's passed and funded, should then dig into the weeds to solve those issues.
Right.
Define weeds, Dudley.
How many designated facilities we need? We should say the DSHS should establish rules to establish designation processes, and then the rules, which are much easier to change than the law. And we screwed up the stroke stuff by saying there was only level 1, level 2, and level 3. Well, okay, so the College of Trauma, the Committee on Trauma screwed that up, and they said level 1s and level 2 trauma centers, except for the research, are basically the same. But every EMS guy in the world knows what a level 4 trauma center is, and that a level 3 trauma center is actually a comprehensive, you can bring people there that are sick, they have surgeons and neurosurgery, etc. Our level 3 stroke centers, because we just didn't think it through, is the lowest level, which we should have made the lowest level stroke center a level 4, not because it's right. The knuckle dragging trauma surgeons did it. It's not right. It is what it is. So if red, yellow, and green is the way the stoplights work, then you use red, yellow, and green, right? It's not that we couldn't invent a better system. It's that we need to do what made the most sense. If we could tell every paramedic you're going to a level 4 stroke center like it was a level 4 trauma center, those kinds of things are in the weeds, but we can do that in the rulemaking and don't write it in the law like we did in the stroke.
And the thing that set me off about the fiber analytics, and we can't do that in EMS, I mean, that kind of stuff's weedy stuff. What we need to worry about is how do we get everybody around the table and in agreement to build a system.
Yeah.
And if we do that well and we walk out of there singing Kumbaya, as I said, this room will be a lot fuller. It will be much better represented in this room because now they're going to want to get into the weeds and make sure their issues are taken care of.
So where does the rulemaking occur?
Here, in this room, led by you.
After the bill is passed.
After the bill is passed, we
And
come
then
in here and they fill in
comment.
the hole.
Okay, so basically, one of the responses for the ACC is that we do have the mechanism already in place. They're welcome to participate.
Yep.
So is it possible then to bring in other stakeholders on the committee? Can we enlarge the committee?
My understanding, and I could be corrected, is that it can be added, there's no specific slots. They could be not expanded, maybe even an ad hoc
Well,
committee.
they have set numbers that are on the GTAC committees, but Dr. White, anybody can come and sit in this room and you can allow as much public comment as you want.
I agree. So I'm the disaster committee chair. I'm Eric Eppley. I don't know that we've met.
Yeah,
So,
I've heard you talk.
so
I've enjoyed it too. Friday morning meetings, I enjoy your talk.
That's okay. I was actually admiring the way you run your meeting back there in the back. So you two ought to get together.
I agree. So, well, can we click on that? I love the committee chair has a great deal of flexibility with how you manage this room. And we tend to get stuck in some kind of Robert's rules, very stiff. We're doing a great job now. This is exactly how you could do the whole thing. The committee's there, but you could have people come up one at a time. You'd have people lined up out the door wanting to speak and talk with the group about this. And I hold meetings that are 6 hours long. Every other quarter, I do a work day, not a committee meeting, and we go for 6 hours. We've had meetings, the trauma systems. I got stuck with Stuart. He put us in that ACC building over there off of Mopac for 3 days or something. Do you remember? We got to do when the money bill got approved for the trauma legislation. So there are ways to do that I think that would be highly effective as a committee. But it doesn't mean you have to add slots to it.
Can I make a short comment? In the letters that I read on the ACC, they're actually asking to be involved, and they're asking for a task force. In the other states, the members of that task force were kind of outlined and very specific. Like one member would be someone from the American College of Cardiology. So in our committee, we could actually designate who we needed on our committee without creating another level.
Dr. Wozniak and I are both members of the fellows, the American College. I'm actually was on the Interventional Cardiology Council of the ACC. Now I'm on the Surgeons Council. We have been involved in rulemaking for 30 years at the national level. And yet the Texas ACCs claim to be representing all of cardiologists in Texas with the issue that, God forbid, we should require them to do more than 6 acute PCIs a year to be credentialed.
We did, one of the amendments that was offered was to do just that, assign slots and empower the Cardiac Care Committee to write the rules, because there is legislation that needs to be done to give Cardiac Committee the power to write the rules. And right now, they didn't want any of that. We tried, and we will continue to try. And one thing I do want to say is I'm loving this discussion. I'm glad we're here to have discussion. I did reach out to Eric and Dudley, and they were gracious and very upfront, and they told me we need to do a big monster bill that has everything, keep into consideration everybody's needs. And what they repeated today was what they shared with me and other RAC folks that I visited with. And as the process went, we learned about new stakeholders and more stakeholders and different specialty groups. So while we weren't successful in passing the bill, we were successful in elevating the discussion. And I'll commit now, there's only one of me right now for the Heart Association from the lobbying side. We will work with all the stakeholders. We will, we want to use this time between now and January 2015 to get everybody in this room's input and try to develop that piece of legislation that will reduce that number that Dr. Smalling demonstrated of deaths of heart attacks.
Dr. Smalling, if I can, and Joel,
come on, there.
Okay. It was the same today as it was when we talked to Joel last year, and I don't want to downplay. Joel and the American Heart Association were trying to push something through Texas, and Texans aren't good about being pushed. When we get pushed, we have a tendency to dig our heels in and say, wait a minute. And what you heard there is when I kind of laughed and people around me laughed, because not everybody here may be familiar with my episodes during the legislative session, but they do not like surprises in committee hearings. I can testify to that. But what I think we really need to do is, and no disrespect to American Heart Association or any other group, ACC, anybody else, Dr. Smalling, you, Dr. Wozniak, you, Dr. Cooley, this is your job. This is your process. It ain't, what does the AHA say it should be? You guys are the cardiologists in Texas who have stepped up and said, I'm going to be a part of driving this for the entire state. So you guys call everybody together. You guys drive this. These guys are no different than ACC. The RACs are no different than these guys, except the RACs are going to be whose backbone you build it on. But these guys are going to bring resources and research and dollars to help make some of that happen, but you guys determine what you want this to be. You guys are the doctors. We're all going to be there. You raise the flag, we're going to come in bus loads to say we want to help, and this is what we think. And we beat it out with a hammer until we get something we can all live with. Then we take it to the legislature, and you don't have people coming in. And if you have people coming in, it's much easier to disarm them talking to legislators in their office about, we tried and they just wouldn't. But here's all the groups we have participating. Here's all the people we have signed off on this. And this little fringe group now coming in at the last minute trying to do this, I don't know what they're doing, but they wouldn't play with us when we asked them to the playground. And you bump over those people like speed bumps at that point. When you go in one direction without doing that ahead of time, all these speed bumps start coming in, and pretty soon they can't.
I got it. Been there, done that. I've got my nose bloody. Is Warren Cooper here? Warren, not here? So I had, since we're being open, I get these little blurbs from the TMA about what a wonderful job we've done with the legislature, blah, 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 blah. And I responded to one of them. And I won't tell you exactly what I said in there, but I told them that, you know, because of your wonderful response, we've continued to have a 10% mortality in heart attack patients when it could have been 3% if you'd been helpful. And I got a phone call and a couple more emails, and so now it looks like I'll be invited to the October meeting of the TMA to discuss the issues and sort of build that bridge. But we need to be basically getting around the table, and everybody's going to take somebody to take to dinner and talk about it, so we can use advice from everybody. I will tell you that Joel did everything. You know, yes, they came in with, you know, their certification system, but he backed away and made a different bill. Said, well, here's a different one, and Dual passed it, and the Senate passed it. And then it got to the House, and Zerwas said, I can't go against it because there's so much noise out there. And then one of my best friends from medical school is director, CEO of the THA, and he came as soon as Joel called him. He came over, and he made some phone calls and so forth and so on. He was with us, and he told us, well, you know, what's happening is the Austin hospitals are bound together and they're raising the ruckus, and the other hospitals won't talk. And so we got our lobbyists from Houston involved, from our hospital system, and he's committed to helping next year. So, and it's the largest hospital system in the state. So hopefully we can make enough inroads to head things off the path. So
Joel's point was just huge. We need to start today.
Yeah. Okay.
With everybody, so my name's Christine, I'm from Waco, and so I'm a small RAC. We have 2 PCI centers, and in Lonnie's presentation when she said these are the only regions, so I respectfully say not the only regions, just the only ones that could be included, because the rest, some of us have to group together with other regions to do the regional data, because we only have 2. There's 1 or 2 or 3 in Temple area. There's 2 in Brazos Valley. So the smaller, even though we're smaller and we only have 2 PCI facilities, we have a very strong STEMI system, and we have a lot of information and passion to bring to the table. So I just don't want it to surround around the big group. I'm making you a big group on it.
And I'm just going to clarify, the circles were the regional reports that are through the Mission Lifeline regional reports. Yes, you can.
It's only, I've talked to Diane. She's talking to us with only 1 or 2 PCI centers.
You can do it with as many as you want. We have some with 3 or 2 in the system.
Diane's been in contact with us about grouping those racks together so that it's a more blinded data than no.
I think that's the difference in STEMI and stroke. It's 2 separate animals.
Yeah. Right. So, but my point is that the smaller racks also have information to bring to bear.
Perfect. Well,
we'd be interested in being part of it.
The more the merrier. We need all the help we can get. So we sort of, I think we.
Dr. Smalley?
Yep.
While you're walking, go ahead. There is something that we've been made aware of. Thank you. There's something we've made aware of that I don't know if you guys are aware or not, of the $3 million that was passed through the legislation and awarded to the CV Council that's been earmarked for stroke education. $500,000 allotment each to the health science centers. $3 million will go exclusively to the health science centers and $500,000 amounts for education. $3 million is twice as much as we have for the entire trauma system budget. And look what we've done in the trauma system with $1.5 million. Can you imagine if we'd taken $3 million and applied that to stroke and acute care system development? It's unbelievable to me, and almost no one saw that money kind of made it through.
From what I understand, that money is being directed by the Texas Council.
The CV, the cardiovascular, that's the one you're talking about.
Yes, it's not being directed by us.
They can lobby, right?
Do what? Christine?
Ask that again.
What did you say?
We have no say in where that money goes.
I think it was a point of information to the group. We know that you guys didn't say
And you guys
that.
didn't. It was directed. But the fact of the matter is, $3 million got set aside to do something in stroke. And
Yeah, I talked to Dr. Grata, who's the chairman of our stroke system in our hospital, and he said basically they have a telemedicine program for stroke, and that was largely designed to fund the telemedicine program for stroke, so that community hospitals that see stroke patients can get advanced care instruction from a center that will help them. So that was a specific program that got funded. It wasn't just random money. This is out of school for me, so I think we need to table that particular discussion at this point and realize that I think take it as a nice sign that 3-4 some millions of dollars were approved for acute care, and use that as a model to go forward with other funding as you suggested.
think how many 12 leads we could transmit for $3 million.
Yeah, okay, so,
Just saying.
So, Dr. Cooley, would you care to comment on Senate Bill 8, Section 14, from the cardiovascular perspective?
From the cardiovascular perspective, I'm not sure there's anything terribly specific. It's obviously, looks like my understanding of the impetus of the bill was to help regulate some of the private non-EMS or non-emergency ambulance services and that have become issues in certain parts of the state, I guess. Did anybody else have any other thoughts on that, or anything that was specifically come out of the committee, other than some of the suggestions or ideas that any agency needs to coordinate with local regional STEMI processes? So if they have a contract and they pick up a patient that seems to meet criteria for PCI or STEMI, they should interact in some way or fashion, but I don't have anything terribly specific otherwise.
Okay, so what am I supposed to tell the council tomorrow about that bill, Senate Bill 8?
I don't think there's anything
Not much to do.
Not from our very specific subcommittee, unless others have other thoughts about
Okay.
that.
Could you give us guidance on that?
Sure, I can. The other councils are looking at it. I think are more directly affected. This legislation was really written, and this report is really written on how to stop some fraud in Medicare for non-emergency transports. So from your council and from all councils, if you have some thoughts on how we could prevent some of this, get the information. I can tell you that Dudley's doing a show around the state, a road show around the state, 4 different shows. And so there'll be opportunities to gather stakeholders, but the department is required to get stakeholders' input into this issue. From your standpoint, I'm not sure there's a lot, but everyone has to have the opportunity. So
Okay,
we're just
so
looking.
we won't have anything to add for that, for tomorrow's report. Now, so one point of reference, in terms of suggestions for legislation and suggestions for rule making. I've had mixed signals about whether it's okay to discuss that in this venue. Is it okay to discuss that in this venue?
You know, and it's nice to meet you, Doctor. My name is Joe Schmier. I'm the State EMS Director. I've been here about 8 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm still learning your laws, and I'm not sure.
What a better way to find out.
To be perfectly honest with you. But we'll do some research, and we'll make sure you have that information before the next meeting.
Okay. All right, well, yes?
I can probably provide a little insight into the discussion about, I don't even know if this is on, but the legislation. The legislation created the council, and the council created the committees. As I understand it, you may not go to the various legislative bodies, represent yourselves as GTAC in the lobby. There's probably a fine line discussing legislation. It's probably not a good idea for a GTAC committee to develop legislation that could be perceived as lobbying, I think. But that doesn't stop this group from, say, meeting afterwards and having a discussion about what might be good for the state of Texas. But we'll get an official answer back for you. But all the work that's going on, all the discussion has been really excellent. So keep going, but we need to be cautious and double check before we start talking about legislation. And the other thing is, if there's anyone interested in legislation that is directed toward the GTAC process, I would recommend that be directed to the council, because the council then has flexibility. You know, the stroke committee kind of snuck up on us, and then it hamstrings us, and there's a lot of things that we can do and a lot of flexibility if the council is directed to come back with rules and regulations.
So Chief, if the council basically creates rules and regulations, it can come from the committee, and they approve those recommendations?
The committee can make all kinds of recommendations to the council. The council could then approve those, and our job is to recommend to the Department of State Health Services.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And we would be happy to do that.
Appreciate that. So we're nearing the end of our allotted time. You know, I've heard that Eric doesn't watch the clock. I don't know how the transmission process, whether there's a satellite link that's going to break or something. But at any rate, let's go down the line on the committee. Any further comments? Todd? Catherine?
I just had a couple things. I would like it if we could really soon decide what we want and what we want the paper to look like, the suggestion. There are several things in here. One thing I noticed with our committee as it currently exists, most of us wear a lot of hats. That's what EMS does, but in nursing. But I think that we would have representation on this committee of several different of these stakeholders that we could access, and our talking points need to be the same, whether we go about this individually along with a recommendation to the council. If our talking points are the same and we're talking to our representatives and senators with the same piece of information,
yeah.
I think we'll be much better off.
Lonnie? You sure? You always have something. No? Great.
I would just say with our next meeting, my understanding will be in conjunction with EMS Expo, we'll be in kind of a captive area. Might be an opportunity to develop a work session as well to start this process, since we obviously have a fairly tight timeline.
Or the meeting in San Antonio.
Or the meeting in San Antonio.
Yeah.
Although I'll be taking my
Stimmy
national
Texas.
boards that day. So.
Well, good luck on your test.
Yeah, thank you.
So, okay. Perhaps the STEMI conference would be a good place.
Yeah.
That would be
That's another
a good
possibility.
place. Okay.
At least a start.
All right. Robert?
I appreciate, I think it's really good discussions and just sharing ideas, and I I think that one thing that I learned through this process for legislation process, it's probably more common to get up and fail. It's kind of like baseball, you know, you don't get on base every time, and it's going to take multiple times before you connect and get where you need to be. And the process was important to weed out who you need to identify, and this discussion has helped with that as well. And I appreciate Dudley's recommendations.
Christine?
I would like to see us more discussion on the legislation and those pieces, and I think that the STEMI conference in San Antonio, a lot of us will be there. That will be a good time. Do we need to form a work group to do this? Somebody from the state help us in order to discuss this?
So I was actually going to recommend, I was just thinking about this out loud about how we did the trauma legislation.
Thank you.
You guys we need to talk about this with Kathy.
Okay.
Because you may want an arm's length, you may want to report out about it, you may want to participate with it, but I'm not sure you want it to be a work group off of this group.
Yeah.
Because it may very well end up being, we had something called the Trauma Alliance, or something, we ended up calling it Texas Trauma Alliance or Texas Trauma Consortium. And it was just a name. And that was the group meeting, and then we started an email list, and I think we actually had a website with like a page, like it literally had just when the next meeting was, the minutes. And I think that if we were to start something like cardiac care counts at Texas, I mean, those kind of things, and I think Joel could help with some of that, I think other people can help with that. But you will want, I think, arm's length from that being a structure underneath the GTAC.
So something on the order of his Texas STEMI Alliance?
Perfect.
Anybody?
Sounds good to me.
Everybody? Robert, you okay with that?
That sounds wonderful.
GTAC, Dinah, she's not here right now, but Dinah Welch is a longtime advocate and is savvy. Joel knows her well. They've worked well together. And Dinah, now that I think about it, led that trauma consortium and knows well. If we can engage Joel and Dinah equally to engage this effort, I think we'd have the skill set legislatively and the skill set collaboration-wise, and people will show up.
Excellent suggestions. Any other public comment?
Do we need an action item for that, Eric? No.
No, you don't want an action item.
We don't need any.
No, we don't want an action item for that.
You will want a report in the future.
All right. Well, I think we've got 2 minutes and 52 seconds. Joel, you want to say something else?
One quick thing, on the CBD funding of the $500,000, the Cardiovascular Council, my understanding, is created a work group to work on, I think Dr. Rutledge is chairing that work group, and it's going to be reaching out to folks as the council decides how to use those funds. I think they've got, I don't know what his timeline. I think their next cardiovascular council meeting is November 1st. My understanding is he'd like to get the work group going now, reach out to the stakeholders. And I was out of town, so I don't know if this was discussed at the stroke meeting yesterday, but they're try to get some ideas of how to utilize those funds and make recommendations perhaps in October, so in time for the November meeting so they can make a vote.
So Robert?
That might be a good opportunity for RACs, everybody to get engaged with the council.
So when is the next meeting?
The next cardiovascular council meeting is November 1st. It's a Saturday.
So Robert, you're going to be at the STEMI conference?
Oh, in October?
Yeah. So perhaps we could get together then, in addition to the STEMI Alliance issues. Okay. All right, we got 1 minute, 36 seconds left. Let the record say we adjourned early. Thank you very much for
So Dudley, it only does 3